Hey, I'm Walter Block. I am a professor at Loyola University. I'm a senior fellow at the Mises Institute in Auburn, Alabama. I have a PhD from Columbia in economics. And my most famous claim to fame is I once shook the hand of Ludwig von Mises, and I never washed my hand since. It's a little dirty, but if you shake my hand, you can channel Mises.
Thank you.
So we see Murray Rothbard mention the privatization of oceans in some of his works. So how do you think this system can be implemented?
Not too easily. I have a series of privatizations. One of them is privatizing roads and highways. Why privatize roads and highways? Because I don't know the statistics in Turkey, but in the US, some 40,000 people a year die. And I think that if we had competition between road owners, many fewer people would die. So it would save lives and also reduce traffic congestion. Then I have another book on why we should privatize the space race and Mars and Moon when we get there and we live there. And my motto and the third one is why we should privatize oceans, rivers, and lakes. And my motto in all three is if it moves, privatize it. If it doesn't move, privatize it. And since everything either moves or doesn't move, privatize everything. And I'm glad you mentioned Murray Rothbard because he is my mentor and my guru and my friend. I was also a friend of his. Yes, he certainly would favor privatization of oceans and rivers and lakes. And this is perhaps the most difficult. It's easy to privatize land, whether land on Earth, as in roads and highways, or land on Moon and Mars, because the land sort of sits there. You can sort of grab it, whereas the water is, floats around and it's harder to grab. And then there's the water cycle. I mean, the water is in the ocean, and then some of it evaporates and goes into the cloud, and then the cloud rains, and it rains into a lake, and the lake spills out into a river, and the river spills out into the ocean, and we're back again. And it's hard to say, well, we should own this and not that. So it's perhaps the most difficult of the three books in that series. My next book in the series is why we should privatize everything in the city, the schools and the libraries and stuff like that. That'll be easy compared to oceans. So what's the motivation? And my motto here is that land is just slow moving water, and water is fast moving land, because land also moves. We do have mudslides, and we do have volcanoes where land sort of moves. And then we do have water which doesn't move at all, hardly, and that is icebergs or Arctic and Antarctica. So it's not as if land is one thing and water is another thing, and we can privatize land, but we can't privatize water. It's rather a continuum. And I admit I'm stretching, but, I think we should be able to privatize water as well. Why? Well, the GDP, the world GDP is maybe 99.9% on the land and maybe 0.1% on the water. Now, it's a little unfair to say that. It's sort of like in the Soviet Union, what was it, on the private land, which comprised 25% of the total land. They produce 90% of the crops, or 75% of the crops, and on the public land, the farms that were collectivized, there was like 90%, and they only produced 75%. So there's a disproportion. Well, the land water disproportion is similar. Namely, the oceans comprise 75% of the Earth's surface and maybe 1% of the GDP. Now, it's a little unfair because a lot of people are on the land and there aren't that many people on the oceans. But still, this gives an idea that the oceans are not contributing their fair share to world GDP. Nowadays, President Biden is saying the rich aren't contributing their fair share to taxes. That's a very different issue. But the oceans are not contributing their fair share. Why? Well, we have the tragedy of the commons. We're running out of fish because, we have overfishing because if no one owns the fish, if I leave some fish for you, I'm not going to, if I leave some fish for tomorrow, you'll get it. So why should I leave any fish for tomorrow? And you feel the same way. And we have the same problem with the elephant and the rhinoceros and the buffalo on land, the tragedy of the commons. You're not allowed to own these things, and we start running out of them, amazingly enough. So one of the benefits of privatizing oceans is we would get rid of the tragedy of the commons. An interesting, I just wrote an op-ed on China, where China is trying to take over the South Sea, the ocean south of China. And what they're doing is they're building, they get these rocks that are sort of half submerged. When the high tide is up, then the rock is below water. And when the high tide is low, then when the tide is low, then the rock peeps out. What they do is they put some sand and rocks there, and they make islands all over the place. And then they start claiming, well, they own the whole ocean. Well, you know, is this a step in the right direction or a step in the wrong direction? I think it's one step forward and one step backward. On the one hand, they are trying to privatize the ocean, which I think is great. On the other hand, it's the government doing it, not private people. So I'm sort of up in the air about that. But it's interesting in a sense that it's a step toward. Another thing in this book is Katrina. Katrina never hit New Orleans. It hit about 40 miles east of us. It did some damage, but 1,900 people died. Why? Because the levees failed. Well, who made the levees? The Army Corps of Engineers. Well, as a human being, I greatly regret that 1,900 people died. But as an economist, what really bugs me is that these people are still in business. Imagine if McDonald's, God forbid, killed 1,900 people. Well, that would be it for McDonald's. We go to Burger King, we go to Wendy's, or get burgers elsewhere. So the idea is when you privatize it, if you do a good job, you can make profit. If you do a bad job, you lose money. But that doesn't work in the oceans or the rivers or the lakes. So this would be the 5-minute version of the case in favor of that book in terms of privatizing bodies of water.
Thank you. Okay, the next question is, in the anarcho-capitalist ethic, does a person's ownership of their property remain valid after death, or will his property become unclaimed and open to appropriation by others, including his own body? Why is that?
Man dies intestate. Intestate means he doesn't make a will. Then I guess the first homesteader gets it. But most people, they have a will. And when I die, one of these days, I'm almost 80 years old and my time is limited. Although so far so good, so you never know. I'll leave my property to my wife and my kids. And if somebody tries to grab it, they're stealing property owned by my wife and my kids. But if I die without mentioning who should have my property, well, then I think the first person who homesteaded should get it. And I don't think that this is an anarcho-capitalist point of view. I think this is even the usual law among governments. I mean, in the United States or Turkey, I imagine, many other countries, that if you die with no will and you have some farmland, well, who gets it? Well, maybe the government will grab it. I don't know about that. But if there were some vestige of freedom, the person who was there, who first homesteaded, would get it. And that would apply not only to people's property who are deceased, but also to virgin territory. I mean, we're going to go to the moon and Mars one day, hopefully, and we'll live there. Well, who should own what part of the moon and Mars? Well, the people who went there, I guess. That seems reasonable. And now it's true that the way the government would do it is they would say, well, it's owned by the government. But from a libertarian point of view, forget about anarcho-capitalists. Just ordinary libertarians would say that it should be owned by the homesteaders.
Of course, just like how the first colonizers arrived in America.
I'm sorry, just as what?
Just like how the first settlers arrived in America, they claimed that land for their own use.
Right. Yeah, that would be the exact example.
All right. So I would like to get to the next question. So you have written articles on the empirical nature of time preference and its relationship to wealth. Do you think Mises was mistaken in his formulation of the theory of interest? And what do you think of the recent works in that domain?
Well, I don't know that Mises ever, well, my view is that there's a correlation. The richer you get, the lower your time preference.
Mm-hmm.
But is this apodictic? Is this praxeological? I don't think so. Now here, I and Hans Hoppe diverge. I'm now reading his book, The God That Failed, Democracy, The God That Failed, and he pretty much says that the relationship is a negative one, namely the richer you are, the lower your time preference.
Mm-hmm.
And I see this as an empirical generalization. I mean, the richer you are, the more steak you want and the less peanut butter sandwiches, say. But you could be weird and get very rich and then want more peanut butter sandwiches and less steak. You know, it's possible. Well, you know, I think the same is true. Let's say I now get $1 million or $1 billion, something that I never had before. I could change and start spending like a, you know, like a crazy man. If I did so, it would not be a contradiction in nature. I could do it. So anyone who says that you can't do it, I think is wrong. And I don't think Mises says it. I'm not sure. But I know that Hans says that, and I disagree with him.
Mm-hmm. All right, I see. So next question. As a professor in Loyola University, how has your experience been with students that strictly come to learn about libertarianism and Austrian economics? Do you suggest Turkish students that are interested in the subject to apply to this college?
That's a very tough question for me to answer. A year ago, I would have said, come on down. I would have said we have 4 out of 4 people in our economics department who are all Austro-libertarians. And you're not going to get 100% economics department anywhere else that has that. Well, maybe Grove City might, but I don't think they had 4. And since then, one of my colleagues just retired. So I can only say 3 out of 3, and we're probably equal to Grove City.
Mm-hmm.
But recently, I've had some complaints from students who complain that I don't know, I used the word Oriental, that I used cotton picking as an example. And the administration, instead of supporting me, is very much against me and wants me to take re-education camping, re-education training, diversity, whatever. So I'm a little bit more ambivalent about it nowadays than I would have been before. But for many years, I've tried to get students to come here, and I'm very happy that I have maybe a dozen former students who are now professors of economics and who are promoting good economics, and I'm very happy with that. And many of them came through Loyola. A few came through Holy Cross as well, where I was before. But now, as I said, I've been having this difficulty with the administration, which seems to be going, what is it, woke or cancel culture or whatever it is. But then again, a lot of universities have that. And when I was making the case to come and enroll in Loyola, what I said is, look, you know, we have not only the 4 out of 4 economics people, we had somebody teaching business ethics, and there were a few people in law school and a few other professors who were very, very free market and toward liberty. And I said, but, you know, we have plenty of other professors who are, you know, socially just or whatever. So you'll get you know, get both sides. So you'll get diversity, intellectual diversity. But as I say now, I'm a little bit less enthusiastic about encouraging people to come here and study with me, because the administration is, in effect, I think, engaging in a hostile work environment for me. So I'm not as big a fan of coming to Loyola as I once was. On the other hand, hopefully I'll be able to ride this out. And although, you know, as I say, there are students who do complain because, you know, I think I'm very free enterprise, and they don't much like that.
All right. So next question. What would you say are the subjects that require further investigation in Austrian economics and libertarian political philosophy?
Wow, these are very good questions. I don't like them, but they're very good questions because they're challenging me. How dare you challenge me? I want easy questions. What's the matter with you people? I haven't thought about that, but now that you mention it, let me try to take a hack at that. What are the upcoming issues in Austrian economics that haven't been discussed before? Well, you know, that's a toughie because an awful lot of stuff has been discussed by libertarian theoreticians and by Austrian economists. I mean, Austrian economists have made contribution to the business cycle and to monopoly and to inflation. And, you know, it's really hard to think of what Austrian economists haven't already discussed. And that's what you're asking, you know, what haven't we Austrian economists discussed yet and what should we start discussing? I mean, traditionally, Austrians did a lot of work on capital theory. That was sort of our main thing. But more recently, a lot of Austrians got into law and economics. An article I just wrote and I submitted to the Quarterly Journal of Austrian Economics is the Austrian view on charity, donations for poor people. And there's not that much work been done on that. So perhaps this article that I did with co-author with Mark Hughes might start in a new area. It's really hard for me to think of stuff that Austrian economists haven't discussed. I mean, you know, the list would go on for pages and just topics. So I'm afraid I'm a failure here. I'm not really giving you much. Maybe charity would be one example. I think on libertarianism I can do better because, well, you know, let me get back to Austrian economics because there are debates within Austrian economics. And maybe we should do more on that. For example, Israel Kirzner has this thing called pure entrepreneurship. And Murray Rothbard says, no, it's capitalist entrepreneurship. So that would be one thing. And another, you know, that's my solution. Rather, that's my answer to the Austrian question. There are a lot of debates that have to be resolved. Not discussing new topics, but trying to figure out who's right. Another article I did with Bill Barnett was on the Hayekian triangle. Should we use the Hayekian triangle? Roger Garrison has done great work on trying to make it more palatable to the mainstream, and you know, maybe we should settle that. Another one is money sui generis? Is it a unique thing, or is it a consumer good or a producer good? Bill Barnett and I just wrote an article, well, a few years ago, saying that it's a producer's good. Whereas Murray and Mises both have the view that it is unique. So in other words, where do we go on from here? One way is new things that have never been discussed before. And that's a real tough one because Austrians have done so much on everything in economics. But another way, where does further work need to be done is settling disputes. And I've mentioned 3 or 4 disputes. Okay, now in libertarianism, I guess the same thing is true. Libertarianism is discussed everything under the sun. I mean, I'd be hard put to put a list. I would challenge someone to mention something that libertarians haven't discussed. And yet there are disputes. And more work needs to be done on disputes. For example, Murray Rothbard is pro-choice. Ron Paul is pro-life on the abortion issue. Well, you can't get too far further apart than 180 degrees. And you can't get 2 more eminent libertarians than Ron Paul and Murray Rothbard. So that would be one issue that needs more work. Another issue is voluntary slavery. Should you be able to sell yourself into slavery? The example I sometimes use is my son, God forbid, has a horrible disease. And it'll cost 20 million to cure him. And I don't have anything like 20 million. And you, Zorbe, want me to be your slave. I come to your house and your factory or your plantation, and I pick cotton there, or I give you economics lessons or lessons in libertarian theory. And if you don't like it, you can kill me.
Yeah.
But you give me the 20 million. And I then give the money to my son's doctors and I save his life. And as we know from Austrian economics, every voluntary trade is mutually beneficial, at least in the ex ante sense. And I benefit because I value my son's life more than my freedom. And you benefit because you value my servitude more than the 20 million. Well, is this legitimate? Well, Murray Rothbard says no. And many libertarians, Stefan Kinsella, eminent libertarian theoretician, says it's an invalid contract. And then there are people, I think Nozick and me and a few others, who say it is a valid contract. So there's a dispute there. Another dispute. I'm sorry?
Sorry.
Another dispute is immigration. Murray Rothbard once was an open borders person, and now he and Hans Hoppe are regulated borders people. And there are other libertarians, such as myself, who are open borders people. And that would be another dispute that we should address. So one possibility is to, dig deeper into these issues. Here's another one that really puzzles me. I consist of nothing but a sperm and an egg from my father and my mother, plus material goods from my mother when I was in the womb. And we libertarians have this theory that, they should own me because I consist of nothing but them, a part of them. And yet, obviously, they don't own me. So, how do we settle that one? And then there are other issues like what should be the statutory rape age? Should it be 16, 17, 18, 14, 15? These are continuum problems. These are difficult issues. I think any number you pick, suppose you pick 17, well, there are girls who are more mature at 16 and a half than 17 and a half. So, how do you settle that one? And what else is there? Abandonment. I abandon, I leave. I just go to Mars for a while, or Africa or Asia or somewhere. And I come back 50 years later. I was kidnapped by pirates, and you guys are in my on my farm. Well, are you trespassers, or did I abandon it, or So these are other problems that we need more work on. Now there are articles on that. And I've contributed a few, and I still don't know the answer. And, I never let lack of knowledge stop me from publishing. My idea is that even if I don't have the final pure answer, if I start and ask some questions and maybe make some tentative remarks, then maybe other people can say, aha, and trigger them into maybe coming up with something that they might not have otherwise come up with, but for my tentative remarks. So I've written about a lot of these things, and some of them I'm not really sure about, but I'm hoping that they still make a contribution to our knowledge.
So existing issues needs to be settled, specifically the controversial ones, in your opinion?
Well, that would be stuff that I can think of that maybe libertarians might be interested in doing. Another one is, suppose I grab you and I hold you in front of me and I use you as a shield and I start shooting Zorbet. And you can't, and everyone's got a gun. All three of us have got a gun. But for some reason, you can't turn around and shoot me. I'm the bad guy. And the only way Zorbet can save his life is to shoot me. But the only way he can shoot me is shooting you, because I'm using you as a shield. Well, who has the right to shoot would be another issue. And here I think I've written on that. And this is another controversial type issue for libertarians to face.
All right. So next question. What type of strategy do you think is the most fitting for the achievement of a libertarian social order? Do you think agorism is a viable strategy?
Well, my view on that is I'm an Austrian subjectivist, and different strokes work for different folks. I ask, who were the most successful people in converting people to libertarianism? And I come up with two names. Ayn Rand for my generation. And I don't know about Zorbet, how old he looks, but Kaner, you look a lot younger than me. It would be Ron Paul for your generation. And yet these people had personalities almost the opposite of each other. I mean, Ron Paul is what Murray Rothbard would call a sweetie pie. A nice guy. I mean, he's just salt of the earth, a nice guy. You call Ayn Rand a sweetie pie and she's going to smack you. She was not a sweetie pie. And yet she was magnificent. So what I get from this is there's no one right way to convert people to libertarianism or Austrian economics, and everyone who is an Austro-libertarian should do whatever is most comfortable for them. What's most comfortable for me is speaking as I am now and writing and publishing, and that's about it. Other people, we have many other ways. You mentioned, what was it that you mentioned, Sam Konkin's thing, agorism?
That's agorism, yes.
Another way is think tanks like the Mises Institute or Cato Institute or Reason, Independent Institute, PERT. These are other groups that promote liberty. Fraser Institute in Canada. There are Mises Institutes all over the place nowadays. Hans Hoppe has this wonderful thing in Turkey and Bodrum where he invites people to have seminars with each other. There's the Free State Project in the U.S. where everyone is encouraged to go move to New Hampshire because then we'll, have some more of an effect. In the U.S. there are think tanks, 50 states, 50 think tanks. The one in Louisiana is called the Pelican Institute, which is very good. So there are many, many ways to promote liberty. And, maybe the best way to promote liberty is with a rock and roll song, or maybe, what is it, that type of music? The rhyming music that a lot of rap music, that's it. Maybe rap music will do it. Maybe it'll be a movie. Maybe it'll be, I don't know, a play or another novel like Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged.
So next question. In what ways do you think a privatized police force would be superior to the state-owned one?
Well, in the U.S. nowadays, there have been some cases where white policemen have shot black people. And there's a movement to defund the police. I don't know what it is in Turkey, but in the U.S., there are more private police than there are government police. People who guard the shopping malls, Loyola University has a police force. It's a private police force. So in what way would private police force be better than government police force? Well, government police force comes from taxes. Taxes are compulsory, whereas private police forces are paid by voluntary contributions, and voluntary contributions are better than coerced payments. But it's interesting, I just wrote an op-ed, I don't know if it's published or not, it's in the pipeline somewhere. What is my advice to public policemen? My advice to public policemen is to become libertarians. You'll be shocked. And turn your cheek, no, not turn your cheek, avert your eyes from activities that are criminal but compatible with libertarianism. For example, prostitution. Look, we libertarians don't have to favor prostitution, but we certainly favor the legalization of prostitution. So if a policeman sees a prostitute in the act of selling her services, he should avert his eyes. He shouldn't arrest her. Or drugs. All drugs should be legal, at least for consenting adults. Well, Breonna Taylor, I think is her last name, was shot during a no-knock warrant to search for drugs. An innocent woman, a nurse, contributed to society, a horrible example. Well, if the police had just not done it, and human beings are good at avoiding tasks. If your lieutenant tells you to go and stop this drug thing, you can say, oh, we tried, but, we got the wrong address, or, this or that. There's always some sort of an excuse. Then there was this horrible case where there was this man in Staten Island, a very heavy, big, strong black man selling Lucy's. What's a Lucy? A Lucy is selling cigarettes that are individual, selling 1 or 2 cigarettes instead of a pack or a carton of cigarettes. Well, this is against the law, but if the police had just ignored him or averted their eyes, they ended up killing him because he was very big and strong, and he resisted arrest. And this was another horrible situation. So if the police, the public police, would just focus on real crimes, like the most recent one was there was this young black girl who had a knife and she was about to kill another young black girl, and the police shot her, and they thus saving the life of the innocent black girl who's about to be stabbed. So if there's a murder in the act, or a rape, or a knifing, or some carjacking or kidnapping, okay, yes, police should stop that. But police should stop upholding victimless crimes, or rather not upholding victimless crimes, but stop punishing victimless crimes. And then we'd have less difficulty for the police.
So the thing is, in Turkey, we don't have private police force aside from private security at malls and other private areas. So the thing is, Mr. Block, the state is extremely large in Turkey. It's like an octopus. How would I say? Infiltrating every aspect of society. So. Anyways.
Look, I can't speak for Turkey. I know. I've been there. I visited once, but I know very little about Turkey. So I'd be more comfortable speaking about the United States. And the United States is pretty octopusy, also. With regulations and taxes. And in the United States now, they're having trouble keeping policemen. Public policemen on the rolls. A lot of people are retiring, a lot of people are quitting, and then they try to hire new policemen, and they're not getting as many policemen as they would want. I think in New Orleans we used to have 1,600 policemen, and now we have 800 or something like that.
All right. So next question: do socialist commonwealths suffer a business cycle? And if so, how would the socialist society deal with its business cycle? I think this is a question one of our friends from the Discord group asked.
Well, I think every society should deal with the business cycle in the same way. Well, first of all, don't start it. that would be a great idea not to start it. And the way you start it from the Austrian point of view is you artificially lower interest rates, and the lowering of the interest rates leads entrepreneurs and investors, as if by an invisible hand, to start investing in long-term projects that are not justified by the saving and investment decisions of the people, namely by their time preferences. So the way to solve that is to just stop inflating, stop lowering interest rates, stop encouraging roundabout methods of production. Roger Garrison sometimes says it's as if you need 10 bricks and you've only got 9 bricks, and you have to leave some projects unproduced, halfway done. So I think whether it's a socialist or capitalist, well, if it was a capitalist society, they wouldn't do that. But in a mixed economy or in a socialist economy, they should stop encouraging things like that. The analogy would be, look, right now, let's say we want half peas and half carrots, namely all the money that we want for peas and carrots, we want half peas and half carrots. Well, the government has a great subsidy for peas. And as a result, we have many more peas and fewer carrots than we want. Well, what should we do? Well, shut up and eat your peas, make the best of it, but stop misallocating resources, because all the business cycle is a intertemporal misallocation of resources, as opposed to a intra-temporal misallocation of resources.
All right.
Oh, another thing is stop bailing out. Stop bailing out. What do you call it? Misallocated companies.
Of course.
Let them go bankrupt. Because if you keep bailing out the pea companies, well, we'll keep having more peas. And if you keep bailing out roundabout projects, well, then we'll have more of that, and the business cycle will just continue and be worsened.
Okay. Thank you. And the next question is, what issues do you see with anarcho-capitalism? How do you think they can be mitigated?
Oh, I don't see any issues with anarcho-capitalism. I'm an anarcho-capitalist. I think it's the only ethical and pragmatic solution. Well, actually, I'm in favor of government. We should have more governments. We should have 7.5 billion governments, one for everybody. We should each be sovereign. So when you want to ask a girl out for a date, you just can't ask her out. You have to ask your foreign minister to ask her foreign minister if you can have a date. I'm kidding about that, of course. But the ideal is the more countries, the better. Lou Rockwell once said that the ideal number of countries would be, every country should be about 10,000 people, you know, sort of city-states like we used to have many years ago. And instead, we keep amalgamating. I mean, the European Union is trying to become a company, and you know, we might have, what is it, 1984, Brave New World, we only had 3 countries and they're fighting each other. Monaco would be the ideal. All the countries should be like Monaco.
Monaco, Liechtenstein, San Marino.
Liechtenstein, yeah, those are great countries. The U.S. is too big. The U.S. should be broken up in 50 pieces or whatever. Large countries should be broken up. Ideally, they should be broken down to the individual level. I mean, you know, the question sometimes arises, are Ron Paul and Mises really anarchists? Well, they say they're not. And they say things that are compatible with them not being. But then, you know, you ask about secession. Well, you know, should Louisiana be able to secede from the United States? Yeah, sure, because we believe in free association, and nobody should be forced to associate with anyone against his will. Well, should New Orleans be able to secede from Louisiana? Yeah, sure. Well, should the Garden District, where I live, be able to secede from New Orleans? Yes. Well, how about my block? Should my block be able to secede from the Garden District? Yeah. How about, can I secede from my block? Yeah. So then we get 7.5 billion countries. You know, and again, this is sort of a philosophical thing. We libertarian anarcho-capitalists are not, what do you call it, terrorists or anything like that. We don't pick up any guns and shoot anybody. This is a philosophical claim.
Yeah, thank you. The next question is it possible to minimize the state by using the powers of the state?
Well, how would you use the powers of the state to minimize the state?
It's not my question.
I mean, all right. So
I don't know.
It's like you know, using the power. I mean, the authority of the state to minimize it.
I think jury nullification might be one way to go, and not tax evasion, because you can go to jail for tax evasion. And Peter Schiff's father went to jail, and Vivian Kellums went to jail, but there is such a thing called tax avoidance, namely using all of the tax policies to pay the least amount of tax possible. So these might be ways of using powers that are given to us by the state in order to reduce the state. And another one would be, you know, free speech, to write a book or an article or give a speech about why we should privatize something and we should have less government involvement.
Or let's look at this question from a different perspective. Can the state itself be used to minimize the power of itself?
Well, I used to teach at a public university, several of them actually, University of Central Arkansas, and Baruch College in New York, and Stony Brook and Rutgers. They were all public universities, and I was using public universities to promote good economics, which is not statist economics. So that would be one way of doing that. Another way is in England, I understand in some park you're allowed to stand up on a soapbox and hold forth about something. Well, it's in a public park and you're allowed to, so you're using state property to promote anti-statism in that way. Another way would be go to the public library and learn about economics and learn about liberty and learn about libertarian theory. And that would be using the state to undermine the state, because it's a state library and you're benefiting from the services that they afford you.
All right, I see.
All right. The next question is, how do you believe that the familial structure will take shape in an anarcho-capitalist society?
How will the family structure take shape? Well,
Yeah.
I'll tell you, it'll take a lot better shape than now. In the United States, something like, what is it? 3/4 of black kids and maybe 1/3 of white kids are brought up without a father in the house. Mm-hmm. Namely, the family has been disrupted. And before 1965, before the Great Society of Lyndon Baines Johnson, the numbers were very different. The family structure was much more intact. And there are all sorts of statistics that show correlations that are not just statistical accidents, but causal correlations, that when the father is not in the house, the sons, especially the sons, not so much the daughters, but all children don't do as well. Namely, a family needs 2 parents, a father and a mother, or rather a mother and a father. And the father has been almost banished from the family by the state because of the welfare system. The welfare system gives people a lot of money for single mothers, and this encourages single motherdom. It used to be a disgrace for a single woman to be pregnant. She'd have to go live somewhere else and give the baby up for adoption. Nowadays, there's no disgrace about having a child without marriage. And I think it's due to the welfare system, the welfare state, and it's not just the United States. My understanding is that Sweden also has problems like that. So under the anarcho-capitalist society, there would be no welfare. There'd be private charity, but there'd be no government welfare, especially welfare that has the effect of removing the father from the family. So I think the family would be much more intact and much better off, and there'd be less crime and less suicide and less murder and less unemployment and less all sorts of bad things that occur to children that they don't have a father with them.
All right. Thank you. And the next question is, how do you think a Mises regression theorem applies to Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies?
Well, I think it applies to everything. You know, if you go way back, we get to barter, and I think the regression theorem applies to all money. But, you know, Bitcoin really isn't a money yet, because a money is defined as something that is generally accepted. And, you know, you go to a store and try to buy some shoes, and they're not going to take gold, and they're not going to take Bitcoin. So it's not really a money yet. It might become a money one day. And, you know, I've sometimes been asked, well, which do you prefer, the gold standard or Bitcoin or present fiat currency? And the way I would rank them would be gold first, because when people were free to choose, they chose gold. And Milton Friedman, you know, once had this thing called free to choose, and yet he opposed gold. So I think that gold would be best, Bitcoin second best, and fiat currency worse.
Yes, of course. I mean, how the services sector would work without barter, for example. You're not producing anything tangible. Well, all right. Thanks for this answer. The next question is, does the difference between Lachmann's theory of, hope I pronounced it right, kaleidics, and modern Austrian economists' acceptance of kaleidics constitute the need for revision of Lachmann's theory of capital?
Yeah, Lachmann versus Rothbard would be another issue that needs more resolution. And I'm a Rothbardian on this, as I am on virtually everything else. I think that Lachmann, he's a great guy, and he had great spirit. I met him at NYU, and me and Walter Grinder take some credit for Lachmann being at NYU in the first place, because we were arguing with Israel Kirzner, and Izzy said, what should I do? And we said, invite Ludwig Lachmann to NYU, and he visited NYU. And I think Austrianism took a big leap forward with his being there. And I think we should all be grateful to Ludwig Lachmann. On the other hand, he rejected the idea of evenly rotating economy or equilibrium. And look, it's true, we're never at equilibrium. We're not going to reach the evenly rotating economy, but it's a good idea, a good ideal, because we're always tending in that direction, and he totally rejected that. Well, if you reject that, if you think that economics is kaleidic, namely there's no rhyme or reason to it, well, then there's no economic theory. And unfortunately, all too many of the younger Austrians have followed Lachmann down this garden path, and I would oppose that. I don't think Lachmann was correct. I think it's really an attack on economics. Look, the mainstream says that if we're not at equilibrium, it's market failure, and therefore government has to be involved. And since we're never at equilibrium, the mainstream economists want to intervene in everything. Lachmann says, well, there's no such thing as equilibrium. The moderate position, I think the rational moderate position here, the Rothbard position, is that there is such a thing as equilibrium. Lachmann is wrong. And on the other hand, it's false to say that since we're not at equilibrium, this shows the need for government intervention, as if government intervention can ever make anything right. So that would be another good point for Austrians to dig deep in and mainly take up the Rothbardian position. And while we're speaking on Rothbardian positions, there's another debate between Murray Rothbard and Israel Kirzner. And remember, I was saying that the step forward for Austrian economics is to resolve disputes. Well, Murray believes in the capitalist entrepreneur. Israel Kirzner believes in the pure entrepreneur without any capital at all. And I think Murray was correct on that. And again, too many people are taking the Kirznerian view on that. And I think the Kirznerian view is wrong.
All right. Next question. Can you give up your contract for voluntary slavery at any time? And if you cannot, how is it different from the relationship of individual between the individual and the contemporary state?
Well, I don't know about that last part, but the first part I think I can clearly answer, namely, you can't give up your voluntary slavery. You can't declare yourself, I'm free, because you signed your life away. You got paid for it. You got 20 million to save your son's life. And any decent parent would do that. Now, there is one way to get out of voluntary slavery, and that was manumission. Namely, the master could say, okay, look, you've been a slave for 30 years. You did a great job. And by the way, I promised you manumission. And that's the way I got more work out of you guys. And if I don't adhere to my promise, the other slaves won't work as hard because they're hoping to get manumission also. So that would be the only way to get out of it. But other than that, you signed your life away. The master has a right to kill you, and it's not murder because he owns you. You're like a horse or a cow or something like that. And if he's brutalizing you, you can't call a policeman and say, well, this is assault and battery, because you gave up your right not to be molested in that way.
All right. Thank you for the answer. The next question is, the powers and the authority of the state around the world is growing every year. Is this an inevitable end, or a failure of liberal movements, or due to crises that are going around the world?
Well, one of the books that I co-authored was a thing, I forget what the title of it is, something like, wait, I got it right here. No, I don't have it. Something like Economic Freedom in the World. And I co-authored it with Jim Gortney and Jim Lawson. And what we did is we had 15 or 20 different criteria of what is economic freedom: low taxes, and you can have a bank account wherever you want and stuff like that. And then we asked, is there any correlation between economic freedom and wealth? And you'll never guess what. Yes, the countries that were more free were also more wealthy and also growing freer. And I think the first volume of that was in 1996. And we covered 1975 to 1995. But subsequently, and this was started by the Fraser Institute, and actually it was my idea to start this. And also the, what do you call it? What's that other think tank, the conservative one in Washington, D.C., not AEI, Heritage. Heritage also runs a different one, but it's very similar. and they've been run every year since. And the question as to whether we're becoming more economically free, we only do economics, we don't do personal liberty issues, is an empirical one. And my estimate of it is that it's sort of like a roller coaster. It goes up and down. Sometimes we get a little bit more economic freedom, sometimes a little less. And I'm not sure what the last year or 2 or 3 is. But I don't think there's any inevitability to have less and less economic freedom until we all get suffocated by statism. Mm-hmm. I think it goes up and down. And right now with this politically correct wokeism and cancel culture, you know, it's a downward direction, at least personal liberties and economics, with the election of Biden. And the U.S. has got a big say in whether economic freedom in the world rises or falls. But, you know, sometimes it rises, sometimes it falls. Take Israel. When Israel started in 1948, it was a left-wing government, socialist government. And now for the last 10, 20, 30 years, it's been way more free enterprise. So some countries go up, some countries go down. I don't see any real pattern that is going to hell in a handbasket and will never get better. On the other hand, as I say, in the United States right now, it's not looking all that good with Biden raising taxes and raising regulations and trying to promote unionism and stuff like that.
All right, thank you.
Yes, the New Deal lengthened the Depression. The Depression of 1921 was one that was over in, I don't know, 18 months or 12 months or something like that. Tom Woods wrote a very good book on that. And there were no bailouts. But what FDR and Hoover, there was also a Hoover New Deal. What Hoover and FDR did is they kept bailing out companies that shouldn't have been existing and thus promoted, continued or worsened and made the Depression last for, I don't know, what, 10, 12 years instead of 10, 12 months. So yes, I would say that the New Deal did prolong the Depression and not only made it longer, but made it deeper. So I'm not a big fan of the New Deal.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Block, for this very productive interview. I think we are at the end of our time. Yeah.
Well, I'm inspired by your questions, and if you guys are similar to what the Turkish libertarian movement is like, and I know Hans is there, and Hans is one of the most creative, brilliant libertarians on the planet. I think the prognostication for freedom in Turkey is a very good one.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, thank you.
If only we were a majority, but sadly.
Well, with guys like you, we're on the way up. I'm inspired by you guys. Take care.